Whoa, hello. We are live.
Bam.
Welcome to the .NET Community Stand-Up. We have a cast of thousands today. So this is everybody that works on Razor tooling. Is that how you'd best describe it?
If only it was that simple. So it's like when you deal with something like Razor tooling, which is like an amalgamation of a ton of different languages, we kind of spread across a lot of different teams for all intents and purposes. So like I more say this is the core group that can decide like what type of features are exposed to everyone else. But there's a lot that goes into it. I hate to say that we're the only ones because there's so much work that goes into making it good.
Yeah. That's like a lot of things at Microsoft. People always think there's one person working on one thing, and it's like, well, this person does the back end, and this person does the specs, and this blah, blah, blah. So yeah. I'm excited to hear more. Let's jump right in with the community links for the week. I will pop over here. As always, I will share these out in the show notes, in the chat, everywhere. So do not worry, they will all be shared out. And yet, one person will say, will these links be shared? So be that person, somebody. Here we go. First of all, I thought this was really cool. This is David Weiniger, and he wrote this thing up using source generators. So the idea is, this is an interactive thing. You'll see here's program code. Here's my source generator over on the right. And then here's the output. So here he did a hello generated world, hello world. And you'll see in this program, there is no hello world generated class. And that's because that's actually being generated in the source generator in the upper right. And then the generated output generates this class. And then the output pulls it all together. So there's the very simple one. If you're like me and your first quick look at this page, you miss it, this dropdown is really neat because this actually shows some more advanced use cases here. So here's an auto notify, like the good old auto notify property change business. So there's a lot more code being generated there. And then there's also this dependency injection case. So also interesting. And I've heard, and I haven't really read or thought more about it, but I know people like to argue about using source generators for dependency injection. So here you can play with this live. So
see, that's actually a really interesting thing because dependency injection is expensive in its own right? But if you use source generators for it and you build in the construction of these objects at compile time, it is so much faster. And that's one reason why it's so appealing. And it's why source generators in general have a large appeal to them.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm like, kind of mind blown because I mean, you can run this code to, it could be reading, heck, it could read from a file or a database or whatever, right? You could use templating and stuff.
Yeah.
So
many things you could do in this, like even Razor, like we have an item on our to-do list to enable source generators to make it so we can kind of integrate better with the C# compiler and generate the right things when we're parsing our code. So yeah, they're so powerful.
Yeah, wild stuff. So this is neat. And this is cool too. This is all using it's using Blazor and a bunch of other cool stuff. He had a tweet about it. It's all out on the GitHubs. And
is it WebAssembly? Did he say that?
I think he said it. Let me see. Gosh. So this is a tweet I read last week, and then I'm trying to remember exactly what all is involved.
Man.
I don't know what. I'm sorry, and I also didn't hear. What was your question?
I asked if it was a WebAssembly, just because it's a very powerful thing to be showing and letting people do. So that's it's very cool.
Right. I think part of the neat thing though is if it is Blazor front end. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this would take.
We'll have to ask him. We'll have to ask.
Yep. There we go. All right, this is neat. So a new release of .NET HTTP REPL. So this is 5.0 preview. The reason that I think this release is neat is because Brady Gaster tweeted that there's open API support in this. So the 5.0 version specifically includes support for open API as well. So that is neat. This whole HTTP REPL thing has been around for a bit. You can integrate it as a tool. Oh boy. We just got raided by C# Fritz. Now there's 1,000 people. The Twitch stream is going insane. C# Fritz friends, you are in the right place. We are just starting the .NET Community Stand-Up. We're going to be wrapping up. I'm going through community links, and then we've got the whole team that works on Razor tooling, and they're going to be showing us tons of cool stuff. So your day is just going to get better and better. LiveSharp, this is interesting. I just saw this is a product. It's installed as a .NET global tool. It's relatively inexpensive, €15 a month, 150 a year. They also have a 14-day trial. And some of the neat things it does, so it's got Xamarin Forms hot reload. It's also got stateful Blazor hot reload. So that stateful reload is interesting, that server side.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. And then also ASPNET core support here as well.
I'm curious.
Yeah,
I don't suppose it's open source, is it?
I don't think it's open source. It's
it's one of those ones where I would love to kind of jump in there and see how they make all this work.
Yeah. It is a .NET global tool, so I'm sure you could IL spy some fun things. But
yeah.
Or it might be in FAQ or documentation. I'm not sure. So I will leave that as an exercise for the viewer. Here's another neat thing. Speaking of global tools, this is something Syed Hashimi is working on. This is a .NET tool, and you'll see here he's got an animated GIF, and he's doing template. Whoa, I've zoomed so much. So he's doing CLI-based template selection. So it's searching and stuff for templates. So here he's doing template search view, and then he gets a list, and you can just arrow up and down and select different ones and install them. So I think that's really neat. He shared out the repo. He did make me promise to say this is a super early preview. It's just something he's playing with, but he would like people to check it out, give suggestions and feedback and stuff. So there you go. .NET Global Tools, man, they're so cool. You can do so much neat stuff with them, and it's neat that you can include them like per project as dependencies, and there's so much neat stuff that's available there.
I remember before they even had like a .NET install equivalent for global tools, and you would have to just go and download it and put it in a folder in the right location and add it to your path, and now it's just magic. And it's just incredible.
And it works pretty darn well, and the updates work, and it's pretty slick. Yep. Here's a neat one from Phil Hack. This is ASP.NET client validation. This is ASP.NET MVC client-side validation without jQuery. So this is based on a fork, and then he's been continuing to just do new releases on it. So it's available via all the places. He talks about just the value of simplifying it down, just getting a really tiny jQuery-less installation. And they just had 024 release, and so cranking away, good stuff. And that Phil guy, I think he knows some stuff about MVC.
Just a little bit, right? I'm not like he used to work on it or anything.
Right. .NET Conf 2020, so that's November 11, and the call for papers is open. It closes September 14, so now is a great time. This is they're open. All the information's here for what you need to do, what you can submit on, and .NET Conf, of course, is a huge thing every year. I'm excited about the .NET 5 release expected for then, and just all the stuff. So get in on the fun and submit your papers. Okay, this one is one that quickly goes over my head because it's security, and the one thing I know about security is to not think that I'm an expert, no matter how many times I read something. But Damian Bowden's been doing these series for a while on encryption using different standards in .NET Core and ASP.NET Core. So here this is encrypting texts for an identity in ASP.NET Core Razor pages using AES and RSA. And there's a lot of code here because it's not super easy. The thing, actually, he's kind of sums it up down at the end. So he shows here encrypting and decrypting texts. And then he explains kind of the value of it kind of down near the end. So using asymmetric encryption this way, together with symmetric, text can be sent on an insecure channel in a safe way, like, for example, using an email. So I think this is interesting. Usually when I share something that's security related, somebody who understands security better than me.
Where's Barry?
Yeah,
Barry Dorrance.
So, but this looks cool. And I just always appreciate, like, Damien's continued to crank out a lot of great content for years. And it's been fun to continue to feature his stuff on the community stand-ups. All right, great post from Dave Brock. I've seen a lot of just people digging into Projecti. I'm a fan of it, and so this is neat. Dave's just talking about his experiences setting up, getting started with Projecti. So walking through the installation, the setup. He's got a pretty nice console background set up there. The dashboard, which I think is great. I think that is, like, if that's all Projecti did, I'd be sold. It's pretty neat.
It makes it so much more discoverable to understand what's going on instead of diving through all of your console output to find out where servers are running, what PIDs they have, and
exactly. And the logs, getting integrated logs and all that stuff pulled together. And if it understands if it's functions or if it's Docker, it gives intelligent information here.
Yeah.
The metrics here that he's showing. It's neat too that this is that dashboard is all built using Blazor, which is pretty neat. Like the whole kind of hosting and setup.
Yeah.
So if you wanted, you could customize it and all that. So yeah. So here he shows building out a simple API, and then building a web project. So already we've got a whole microservice architecture, right? And then integrating that in. So here we've got a browser, then adding in more dependencies. When you can just do tie run and it'll run the project and it inspects the solution and the projects and knows how to launch it. But if you want to customize it, then you do tie init and it creates this tie YAML file. And then you can go in, and so here he adds a dependency on Redis. And then he can go and integrate that into his tie YAML file and put in the Redis magic stuff here. And then boom, good to go. So anyhow, this was great. He said he's starting on a series here, so I'm eager to see more from Dave, and great stuff. The last thing I want to show, just as a shout out, is we're kicking off another. We've got all the community stand-ups. So tomorrow we've got machine learning is doing their first one. So we've had every other Wednesday we have Entity Framework on, and tomorrow we're starting with the machine learning team, and they've got a cool show planned, and they're going to be every other Wednesday. So every week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 17 UTC, we've got a community stand-up for you. So there's so many stand-ups. And with that, over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember when we first started this whole stand-up business, like there was like just one, and I think we did it every now and then, and now it's like it makes sense to have these like conversations like in public, and actually talk about what we're doing, see what the community's doing. It's really cool, kind of see how it all evolves.
I love that we started with, oops, are we on? Wait, I can't get my headset working, and it's kind of we've gotten our act together a bit technically, but as I told you guys when we were setting up, I want to see at least one demo fail today. It's part of the fun.
Like we have so many demos in line for today. Like honestly, I think we're gonna be running a little close on time for this. That being said, if we don't get at least one demo fail, we're probably lying to you in some way. But I highly doubt we're gonna get 0 demo fails. If we get one, we need applause, and it's like party foul. No, but demo fail.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess you could hop over to my screen. I always actually. So we're doing a slide deck because there's a lot of us, and I think this is like the only reasonable way to kind of orchestrate everyone's thoughts and make sure that we can kind of show you what we're doing. We kind of started this journey for Razor tooling a while ago, and we realized that we've put all this effort into something like Blazor and its runtime capabilities, and realized, you know what, like there's this tooling that's powering it that's been there from the beginning. It hasn't changed, and it's collecting a lot of dust. And so over the years, we've actually tried putting in time towards it, but because of its nature and how old it was, we found that it was really hard to do that. Let's see. Can I click? Yeah, there we go. Background and goals. So yeah, so like a number, like as we're kind of going through this journey, we found that when we wanted to do new features, it would take an extraordinarily long amount of time to do any feature. And we hear from people that like we want our C# experience to be just as good in Razor as it is outside of Razor, and I totally get it. I would too. I'd love that. It's a really hard problem to solve though. And then you combine that with, say, more platforms. Like we now have VS for Mac, we have VS Code. There's like sub platforms inside these platforms. Like we have LiveShare, we have code spaces, we have like try.net. We now have like VS Code in the browser. There's so many things that are trying to have a good, consistent Razor editing experience. And so as these things have come up, we're having a really we had a really hard time solving the problems of what it means to actually edit in Razor for every one of these. And so when we're looking at our existing like dusty platform for a Razor editor, we're like, darn, like we really need to rethink what this means. And then of course Blazor comes along and is like, yeah, let's reinvent everything. And let's require more features. Let's make this really polished and really good. And so we said, okay, well, Razor is difficult. It's like working with 5 languages in one: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Razor, C#. And the existing editor is highly coupled. Let's re-envision it. Let's fix it. So, like, as part of this, we decided to actually make the jump towards fixing it because we keep hearing all these pain points of like, yo, I keep getting unexpected name foo. Is this intended to be a component? This is like probably one of the #1 things we hear from users is like, they tell us, yeah, it's telling me this component doesn't exist, but it totally does. And this is just one of so many other errors that we hate that everyone has to deal with, and we want to make better. Then, of course, if you start bringing performance into the mix, like typing delays, IDE crashes, we've actually done a ton of work on the existing editor and a new editor, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit, to make it a lot better. Tanay, actually, he's done a ton of work in this area and to try and make that entire performance experience better. And now this doesn't solve the crashes per se currently in the existing editor. We're working on that in a separate way, but it does solve the I type, I wait way too long, and then I see a result. So it does fix that. And so like, and I kind of mentioned lacking features. Yeah, we want to add new features. Like we hear all this on a daily basis, and we totally hear you. We're working on fixing it, and sadly, it's taking a good amount of time to fix it. But we are working really hard at doing that. And kind of, we've been at this. God, I want to say few like 6+ months now, I want to say, like working on this new experience and trying to build something that kind of translates across all of our platforms. And yeah, so it's definitely been a journey. So the existing solution I had mentioned is like highly coupled. This is kind of how it actually plays out, where you have all these various languages that Razor cares about, and they each say, oh, here's how I work in Visual Studio. Oh, here's how I work in VS Mac. Oh, here's how I work in VS Code, right? And then the same thing kind of plays out with, oh, here's how I work in LiveShare. Oh, here's how I work in code spaces. And as you can imagine, that is not a scalable approach to tooling, where it's like, if we fix something in Visual Studio, we don't have a massive team, right? We can't just go ahead and just hire a whole bunch more people and then then work just as good in VS Mac and make it work just as good in VS Code, at least not with how it was built beforehand. So we said, okay, well, our new solution needs to fix something. It needs to rethink how we approach this problem. And so if you've heard of Language Server Protocol, LSP, this is what VS Code is actually built on, this idea. And our new solution was, well, if we can harness the same type of underlying concepts, a language server protocol driven approach, we can solve all these problems. We can basically say, if all these languages say, I implement LSP, and the platforms on the right-hand side say, well, I understand LSP, it means we only need to implement LSP, and the right-hand side will just essentially work, which is nice. Now, in practice, it's a little more complicated than that for Razor because we have so many different languages, but we can get so much value out of making things platform agnostic by depending on this like middle LSP layer. And I have LiveShare down here because what's one of these things where LiveShare is an implementer of this as well. They are remote development. You have something on your client and you're working with another box, whether it be someone else's box, whether it be something in a totally different operating system. And code spaces, that is a similar model here where it's you're running on a computer somewhere in Azure coding. So our new solution is basically being LSP, and our goal here is to make it so that we can deliver features faster, better. As new features come to the language server protocol spec, we can adopt them quicker. This is not something that's been possible in the previous editors, because one of the cool things is if you added a new feature in Visual Studio, well, it doesn't mean it's there for VS Code. It doesn't mean it's there for VS for Mac. However, with our new approach is if you add it to the language server protocol, assuming these platforms support it, at the very least, you don't break the other platforms until they support it. But once they do, you magically get this new behavior and you magically get this new support. So it's something we're really excited about. So, okay, so I'm gonna kind of jump into a demo real fast. And we're gonna be showing a lot of things right now. And first is we're gonna be using different IDEs. Some of them is gonna be VS Code. So in VS Code, how to actually use the editor for what you're gonna be seeing is all you need to have is the C# extension installed. That's it. You'll get this new editor. As you can see here, the H1 tag is different from survey prompt. It's because our new editor is running. It's coloring. Like I know that string or title is a string, for instance. Our editor runs in VS Code. This is actually one of our motivators for bringing it to the other platforms. So C# extension, and then you should be good to go. That's how you do it in VS Code. In Visual Studio, we have a Newel and everything 16.7 preview 4 and above, which you can validate by going help about. There's this little version. Let's see that. That's probably impossible to see here, isn't it? Oh my gosh. But here we go. Can you see that? I can no longer see my own screen, so I'm hoping you can see this. But if this is version 16.7 preview 4 and above, oh gosh, I'm gonna stop that. Let's see, can I go back? Yeah. If it's 16.7 preview 4 above, you will get this tools, options, preview feature, enable experimental Razor editor. And this is actually something that Daniel Roth did a blog post about, a new experimental Razor editor for Visual Studio. So you can go ahead and just search this and see what Dan posted. But the idea here is this will then swap your Razor editing experience in Visual Studio to this new experimental editor. Now hold your breath. There's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of bugs. Like right now, like some of the most like drastic bugs is if you close the solution, VS crashes. That's awful. If you close the editor and you reopen it, you don't get C# or HTML experience anymore. So there's some very glaring, obvious issues, and that's just what it is. We're working on it. We're working on fixes for it. It's not perfect. Some other glaring issues, you'll have like colorization mishaps. So like colorization won't be as consistent as you say you want it. So we'll see that.
Taylor, you're really selling this.
I know. I'm trying to like the long run here, but like see how this isn't colored. Like we have some glaring issues. But the one that you know if you are, and actually you don't. Hopefully in this, like all the demos we're going to show, I'll show you there's a lot more value coming down the pipe, right? Like. And if they're crashing and if things are exploding on you anyways, who needs to close the solution anyways? Like there are other issues, and yes, this is going to improve as we go forward. But I want people to know that this is like our path forward, and it's going to help us solve so many different problems. The best way to know if you're in the new preview editor is you'll notice there's no background coloring to this at all. Typically in Razor files, the background coloring is there, and that's a really key way to know if you're in the new editor or not. And then you'll see some code spaces demos too throughout this. Those code spaces demos are going to, like the code spaces installs have like a specific workload, so you just kind of get it magically for it. And VS Code is the same exact way if you're using VS Code code spaces. What else? Oh, and then for the demos, we are going to be using the default starter web template as much as possible. We want to make sure that everyone here, like most people here have done .NET New Blazor. They know what it's about. We have a lot to show, and we don't want to be explaining what each app is doing every single time we swap to a different presentation. So you're gonna have like the typical like index counter and the basic file new Blazor experience is what we're going to try and limit our demos to, so people can kind of understand what we're working with. And let's see, let's go back.
We did have a question real quick.
Oh, yeah.
While you were talking about, the language server protocol, and you showed Visual Studio to enable it. There's a question if we can use that with VS Code with the experimental support.
Use what though in particular? Like use the new editor?
Like if VS Code can use the experimental language server protocol stuff.
Oh, so it does. So VS
It
Code
already
is
does.
entirely language server protocol driven. So
Okay.
the idea, by the way, so this is kind of an interesting thing, as we can kind of go off here a little bit. So when I say language server protocol, all it's doing is it defines a standard that says if you want to provide completions, or if you want to format a document, or if you want to provide errors, here's how you do it. It's actually all it's doing is saying if I have a server somewhere else and it exposes an API that looks like something that should be able to handle completion, an IDE slash VS, like VS or VS Code on the other end can ask that endpoint, say, what are completions? And it should be able to provide that experience for it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested, let's LP specification, language server protocol. Like there's this, and then I think I always go to the specification itself, which has all these wonderful details about how it actually works. But it's a JSON RPC based protocol that is request response, very REST-like in a way.
So I think the question was like, there's Razor and the work you're doing for Razor to work with language server protocol, and there's an experimental support in Visual Studio for Windows that has that.
Nope.
Is that same support already in Visual Studio Code?
Sorry, yes, it absolutely is.
Okay.
In fact, and to kind of give a little bit of background here is this all started in VS Code.
Started with that, and now this is expanding that, so it's
exactly
shared thing, all of them.
Yeah, because so VS Code kind of was built with the idea that language server protocol is the way to build extensions, right? And then VS was never that way because like LSP is this brand new concept that these editors are now adopting, and so VS is like, okay, well, I'm going to adopt it too. And so each one of these like new editors, whether it be Eclipse, whether it be VS Code, whether like Vim even has like language server protocol support. Like there's all sorts of different editors that now support it, and if they can support the protocol, they can support all these different languages in these editors.
Great.
Yeah, so VS is now building up their support, and then we, of course, are bringing our language server protocol stuff to VS. And what I mentioned now, it's not as straightforward as, say, implementing it for Razor's case. And that's kind of what I'm going to, is we can't just have one language server that works in both seamlessly. We build out the plumbing in Visual Studio, and then it works seamlessly.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Yep. All right. So first demo, Ryan is going to show you some feature-rich, consistent editing. And this is kind of one of our goals, is to make Razor/Blazor good everywhere. So if you want to jump to Ryan's screen.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, we have 90 different screens. Ryan, there it is. Okay. Add. Whoop. And then Ryan's muted. Now he's not. Okay.
It wouldn't be a remote work meeting if someone wasn't muted and trying to talk, right? So when we say feature-rich, consistent editing, what we kind of mean is, well, firstly, feature-rich. You know, all of the stuff you've come to expect in an IDE, colorization, hover, completions, all of that. And secondly, consistent, meaning consistent across all platforms. It should be the same general experience. So I'm just going to run through a couple of our the platforms that we already have support for and kind of show what that looks like. We've got semantic colorization, meaning that it's updating on the fly based on our understanding of
go back to it. So it's like when you hit a space in navlink, like it
exists,
discolored the navlink, right? Yeah. So it click away actually real quickly, just so you can kind of see that. Yeah.
So this is the color of your standard HTML element, and this sort of pale, I don't know what color you call that, greenish color is the color of a component or a tag helper. So we're keeping track of that all on the LSP and through semantic tokens, and passing it along as we make edits, both to this file and to others. So that's that in Visual Studio. We obviously have some other platforms available. Let me get it over here. We can of course do completion. Here I am in VS Code. We get completion on all of the things we expect. well, except for this C# that I'm typing myself for some reason. We can also get auto completion of that. Hover support, we get the pretty hover there.
And I think it's like, it's one thing to really call out here, by the way. There's so many little intricacies in just general editing, where it's like when Ryan said you have auto completion, right? The idea that you get the end tag automatically implemented for you is something that's just taken as is, right? You don't really understand that that's happening until you're typing in Notepad. And then it just so there's a lot of logic running there to make that possible.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of this exists today in Visual Studio without our experimental situation. But in order to bring it to other IDEs, we have to do a lot of work to decouple and figure out what exactly is the desired experience and all of that fun stuff.
I think, like, you're right. It's something you don't think about until it's not there, or it's slow, or it's not working. But it's, yeah, because you've got to parse basically, like, it could depend on the whole document that's on the screen. And plus you're typing it and it could change every single keystroke.
Yeah.
But you don't want to slow down and lock up the browser Sorry, you don't want to, well, it could be browser in the future, but like, you don't want to lock up the IDE, right?
So you say browser, but he is in a browser right now, actually.
Right.
Here I am in code spaces running the same basic application, and as you can see, we get the same basic experience. But more to what you said, it's actually impossible for us to do Razor colorization without some sort of knowledge about what your project contains. You can't do it syntactically. You have to do it semantically. So that was a big thing that we needed from the language server protocol, which is still technically experimental, but we've worked with some of the IDE teams to get that available here.
It's like, so first, like the navlink, that is coming from the framework. Blazor's framework says there's a component called navlink, right? That's not like a hard-coded thing in the editor that knows it. If you write your own files, like yeah, exactly. Like that's something that's in this project. It's something specific to this project. And so it's like, how do you understand that that's even a thing? How do you understand that you should even color that differently? So it's, and that's what we're trying to say, like semantic colorization in that sense.
Yeah. And yeah, I personally have been doing a lot of work on the semantic colorization end, and you know, we're doing our best to give the best experience that we can. Definitely we're hoping for on par with the way things used to be, and of course, one of the things you expect there is to be able to customize all of these elements to your liking. I like big bold colors that let me know when I screw up, so you know I can customize our Razor
who doesn't like bright lime green to burn your eyes out?
I tried to convince everyone that this was the color everyone should have, and they didn't listen to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, wasn't it? You had like light green for the first implementation of this, and then you went to like magenta or something. Is like,
yeah, I had like bright purple and lime green, and everyone told me no. I don't know why.
Now, it's kind of funny, but like this works with theming, right? And then also there's like, when you dig into this, I know this because with VS for Mac, we went through some stuff for accessibility and getting the contrast levels right. Like there's a lot of thought that goes into getting colors, like not having just programmers pick the colors, right?
Yeah, actually, that's something that we had been thinking a lot about. We realized that sort of over time we had just accumulated these colors. They just kind of showed up organically depending on how things worked, and that probably wasn't giving everyone the best experience. So we've got this idea that we're working on. We're calling it Project FCOP, Fresh Coat of Paint, and basically we want to go to the colors of Razor with a whole new view and do some research and figure out what would help people understand that, like, hey, this is a component. Maybe it is lime green. You probably shouldn't listen to me, but maybe it is. And in addition to just helping everyone understand, this is an opportunity for us to increase the accessibility and, like you said, increase contrast between colors and just generally clean up that kind of area. So
like that
we're
dark
looking at that.
green, like the dark green, the on click that we have there, like the one that is pre-existing there. I'm with you. Like in my opinion, that's hard to see. Like, maybe it's just my screen, but it's kind of difficult to see. And for someone who maybe is slightly colorblind, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And even in sort of the base HTML here, like I don't have any colorblind situation or anything, but like this light blue and this slightly darker blue, there's not a lot of contrast there either.
Yeah.
So there's work we can do. And I think we're doing like user studies and whatnot. Is that true, Taylor?
Yeah, like, well, it's one of those things that we have we've done a lot of user studies already for this stuff, and then we're trying to see what is the best way to go about getting the next piece. Like, I guess in these COVID times, you can't really say, everybody come in here and go ahead and try stuff. Let's all get COVID together. No, that's not a great idea. It's more of, well, here's what we're thinking. How do people feel about it? And there's a really interesting line of, this looks better versus this is like distinct in terms of like your mind's eye. So as you're diving through code and you're looking over it really fast, being able to understand which pieces are distinct from others is it's a really hard problem to answer, actually.
So one thing, just because, and it's great, we get a broad reach, people watching on Twitch, we've been experimenting with Periscope too. We're getting some people coming in from there. So people that aren't familiar with Razor, and then you mentioned the things like syntactic understanding and all that. So what, and I know, Taylor, you talked at the beginning about what Razor is, but what's the kind of elevator pitch? What does Razor do and not do? Like we had someone ask, does it support TypeScript? Does it, what all is it?
So Razor in general it is an HTML templating language. So the whole goal of it is imagine it's like an HTML document. And you wanted to also write some C# inside of that document. That is Razor. Razor is the language used to power Blazor for any Blazor environment. It is the language used for the front end pieces of Blazor. And you can interweave HTML and C#. Now, of course, since I'm saying interweave HTML and C#, HTML also has JavaScript. It also has CSS. So you're also interweaving these CSS and JavaScript portions as well. So yeah, it's kind of all the above. And that's what makes it so difficult is all this interweaving.
Okay.
And just one other thing I kind of wanted to hit on there as part of our work here, we're targeting parity with the C# experience in Razor and the C# experience in, a basic C# file. We're working on that. It's going to be a long road. As you can see here, like we don't have the syntactic colorization quite there yet, but we're working on it.
Does that work also with all the things like the Roslyn refactoring and all that kind of stuff too, or how does that interrelate? Oh,
you mean like code actions? Like
yeah,
the light bulbs.
Yep.
I think I think Tanay is talking about that actually.
Yeah.
You're like segueing us perfectly.
Okay.
We didn't even talk about this.
To answer your question, it's not as simple as just making it work as Tanay is going to show, but it's something that's on our mind.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, cool.
Yeah, I think that's all I had.
Okay. So then the next segment here is going to be another demo about something that we call is closed file support, and I'll let Tanay take it over from there. But I guess can you jump to my screen real quickly here, and Tanay, you can kind of talk, and then we'll jump to yours when you're ready.
Let me unmute myself. That's pretty adorable. Okay, thanks, Taylor. So as you mentioned, what I want to talk today about is closed file support. Essentially, what that involves is, say you're in a C# file, being able to navigate to, say, a closed Razor file. At first glance, this may seem pretty straightforward. You're just moving from one file to another, so like, what's the big deal? If you can go to the next slide here, please. Thank you. So some of the challenges lies in the underlying structure of a Razor document. As some of you may know, a Razor document is actually composed of two separate background documents, a generated C# document as well as a generated HTML document. Consequently, when you want to navigate, say, from a C# file, you have to navigate through the Razor document into the C# background document, understand where the various structures are, and carry that all the way back through the IDE and so on. So by navigation, I mean something like a go to definition, find all references, or even if you wanted to, say, do a rename across files and that kind of stuff. So that creates a bit of a challenge, and this hasn't really been possible in the existing Razor experience with, say, finding references across closed files. So we're really glad we can bring this to you through the language server protocol. So I think I should probably start and demo a bit. That's probably a good idea.
Dang, nice, John.
Thank you, John. Okay, so the first thing I want to show off is essentially going to definition on closed files. So I'm on counter.razor here. Hopefully you can see that. And here I have program function, which is just a static function in program.cs. I can just do right click, go to definition, and it takes me right to the function. It opens up the program CS files and does all the magic behind the scenes. So here it's actually understanding, okay, we need to jump to a C# file. It's a different language. Where in the language we need to jump to, and all that
all the
stuff.
things, jumping to the right line number, jumping to, yeah.
Yeah, and if you saw in what Tanay was showing earlier too, the generated C# document, it's not necessarily in the same location. Like in Razor, we have to understand that it's C#, and then it's here in C#, and then this place in C# happens to map to this other place somewhere else, and it's something totally different.
Yeah, and like also keeping that performant. Like here, Waldeck saying about the and he's thinking of the colorization, but like all the stuff to make sure that you're not slowing things down. Do you do this on a background thread, or how do you interoperate in order not to,
Great question. So this is actually one of those pain points that the existing editor suffers from. So as you're typing in the existing editor, not what we're showing you today, it was done on the foreground a lot of the time, where we would be parsing stuff, and then before you get colorization results, we'd essentially wait for a parse to happen to understand how it's happening in colors. Now, I guess, Ryan, do you want to explain the colorization for Razor? Like for the two ways for it technically happens?
I am muted. Of course I'm muted. Yeah, basic. So we have two basic ways to colorize. The first is syntactic, which is sort of the classical way. And that's just you build a series of rules which describe your language, and then you colorize based on that. And with that, we can colorize, our HTML and our CSS and JavaScript and all that. The problem comes because Razor components, I keep trying to say tag helpers, but that's like inside baseball. Razor components could be HTML elements if they don't exist. So with earlier in my example of navlink, if you put the space after nav, then nav is an HTML element, and it would be perfectly reasonable to color that the HTML blue.
Well, and especially now with like HTML has brain not working, but you can define new elements in HTML, right? It's yeah, we had the fast framework folks on like a few weeks ago, and they were showing that. So you can also, it's true, like HTML is wow, it's a lot.
And so because of that kind of behavior, we move into semantic colorization, which is the IDE going to our language server and saying, hey, give me the semantic colors for this particular range. And we analyze the document and send it, oh, I'm sorry, my cat is being bad. Analyze the document and send back the colors after having messed around with it. Generally, sorry, go ahead.
Before somebody requests, can you introduce your cat to the stream?
Oh, goodness. She had surgery, so
okay.
she probably doesn't look her best right now. She's got the
Okay,
cone of shame on. It's
the cone of shame.
Yeah. She's just very restless because she's not allowed to leave this room. Anyway, colors.
Yeah. So you're
What was I
talking about
saying?
the semantic colorization, and you send a range and you get the colors for a range.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we also make the request whenever there's an edit, so that we can update just with the change, and all of that is happening on the language server, which in most positions I think is going to be on a different thread entirely. I think for right now in Visual Studio it's a yes, that's true. I said thread. It's actually a process. Yeah. I think for right now it's actually in Visual Studio, though on a different thread. Taylor, correct me if I'm wrong.
So in Visual, so basically it is abstracted away as if it's like a background thread for all intents and purposes. It's essentially, it could be another process, and VS it's not. It's run in process. So to answer the question fully, there's two ways to colorize: syntactic and semantic. Syntactic is run on the foreground thread as you type, but it's based off of rules, as Ryan mentioned, that are not bound to the parser. So these rules are pretty simple, and they give a general sense of colorization. There's a separate background task essentially that's running at all times in order to colorize the rest of the document, as you'd expect.
Okay.
Yeah. Taylor says it much better than me.
All right. I should let Tanay get back to what he was showing there.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No worries. That was great. Okay, so just to quickly wrap up what I was showing here, we had just done a go-to definition from a Razor file into a C# file. Likewise, another thing that we also enable now is doing find all references. We have a find me and fetch data static function in FetchData. Well, I can just do right click here, find all references. And the incredible part of this is that FetchData is a closed file right now. What this means is that the IDE needs to be able to understand, okay, what is FetchData.razor? What is that background generated C# document that I was talking about earlier? And where in it can I actually find this function, if it exists at all? So here it does all that. And if I were to say hover over it, it even gives me a rich snippet with colorization and all that, just to give me a brief idea of what I would be clicking into. And speaking of clicking into, if I click into it, it takes me to fetchdata.razor. It opens up the function, does all the mapping and all that fancy stuff behind the scenes. And it's pretty great. And like, this hasn't really been possible in the existing editor with closed files. And again, we're really happy that through the LSP effort, we can relieve this pretty major pain point. It's pretty important, of course, to actually be able to navigate between files and find what you're looking for.
It's one of those things too, like people all the time, they have models, they have various data transfer objects that sit in their C#. It's outside of Blazor, outside of Razor. And when they're trying to change or find or understand how these things are used, they couldn't do that in the past without their files being open. So like the idea of a closed file support being there means if you rename, if you go to definition, well, rename's not there yet, but that's on a roadmap. But if you do these things, they impact your closed Razor files. And it's not a simple problem to solve, but it's also one of those things we have gotten from day one that users want, and we've just never supported it up until now. So we've actually been able to make this a possibility.
Nice.
Okay. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah.
So let's head over to VS Code side of things. There are a few errors here. We'll be addressing them pretty soon. So just pretend like they aren't there for now. So the first thing I want to show off is a rename component. So speaking of all this closed file support, if I just click here, hit F2 for rename, I can just rename a component right off the bat. It renames the component file for me. It renames, say, additional reference I totally forgot about in index.razor, and it renames it here, of course, as well. So it's all pretty smooth, and you can get going on your merry way. Another thing, and I think I saw a few people mentioning it on the stream as well, asking about, is going to definition on components. We've finally brought this over as well through just go to definition or F12, and it takes you, it navigates you right to the component, and you can get going right away. So that's pretty great, and I think a few people on the stream may be pretty happy about that. Okay. So along with that, you may also see these references things. These are called code lenses, and they essentially give you a brief preview of what your code is doing, or where your references are for variables or functions and that kind of stuff. So this is currently available in VS Code, but we are working on bringing that to Visual Studio as well. So stay tuned for that.
In VS, by the way, for 16.8, I think preview 1, or was it preview 1? Preview 2. One of those two. We added the go-to definition support in that preview, so you'll have that. And in preview 3, we're going to be having the rename support there as well. So that's going to be making its way.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, like again, this has been stuff that you've all wanted for a long time, so really glad it's here now.
That's very cool.
So the last thing I want to show off here is Lightbulbs. So have you ever wanted like the same sort of rich experience you see in C#? So I think John was asking about this earlier, but essentially, if you go to C#, you see a light bulb with a bunch of actions. Can you get that in Razor?
We're going to pause you actually real quick here.
Yeah, there's a question that came in. So Lucas said, looks like that's working in VS Code. Is that something that will work in the other tooling? If I'm hearing you right, the way that you're building this is it works everywhere because of this whole language server protocol.
Exactly.
Thing, right? Good.
Yeah, and specifically, by the way, existing tooling as well. If they mentioned there in the question is, it's not going to work in the tooling without the preview feature that I showed off in the beginning. You'll have to go into the environment preview features and click the checkbox to enable the experimental editor to actually get the support. It is not possible in the existing one, sadly.
Okay, cool. And I'll update the community links and point over to that post that Dan that you shared earlier about how to enable that.
Cool.
Cool. So yeah, as I was mentioning, same great experience that you see with C#, Lightbulbs, and all that kind of stuff. We're actively working on bringing that over to Razor as well. So in code blocks, function blocks, and that kind of stuff. So first thing, I'm going to, oops, wrong thing. Ignore that. So the first thing I'll be showing here is essentially some of the light bulbs we have for Razor Blazor in specific. So things like if I hover over here, I have a component, the file exists, but it's not really, it's giving me an error. If I look at the file, I see that it's in a different namespace. So I'm just going to navigate back. And as you can see, we now get a light bulb. So I can just click this here, and a using statement is automatically added for me. So it's good to go. I don't really have to think about it too much. It works. Yeah.
That's a big thing, by the way, for like if you just brought in a new framework, whether it be Telerik, DevExpress, your own library. It's a big thing when you're adding a reference to your project and you want to start using these components from it, but you don't necessarily know the namespace they're in. Having to understand the using is something so understood in C# via Lightbulbs that it's just very easy that we're able to bring it to Blazor now. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Tanay.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
I think someone on the team was saying this week they do Lightbulb-driven development. So it's really great to have that sort of capability right off the bat.
I'm using it a lot in understanding new language features. You know, like C# continues to evolve pretty quickly, and looking at those refactorings is really helpful to me. And, you know, so that I'm not writing C# circa 2005. You know?
Totally agree.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. So another light bulb that we've also enabled is creating a component. So here I have the super fancy new prototype. It doesn't even exist yet. I can just click the light bulb, create the component. It creates the file for me. I can go writing my component right away, and it's all great. And that's cool. And lastly, I promise this is the last one. This is going to be extracted code behind. So have you ever wanted to just modularize your code a bit more? You don't want to have all your C# code blocks in one file? Well, this enables you to do just that. If I just do extract a code behind, it takes all my C# code in the code block. It creates a counter.razor file and puts it all there. So you can get working on that right away, and you don't really have to worry about anything else. And that's basically it for the Blazor specific light bulbs. These are already available in the latest C# extension right now, and they'll be coming over to the Visual Studio side of things pretty soon. Okay, cool. And just one final note, sorry. This isn't a new light bulb, so I'm not breaking my promise there. Essentially, with regards to C# specific light bulbs, which I was mentioning earlier. So say if I go into program.cs, you see light bulbs for encapsulating a field or creating a private variable or that kind of stuff. We're working on bringing that over to Razor code blocks as well. But there's just a bit more complexity around that. So we're working on how to best handle that complexity and bring it to users so it's scalable and maintainable and all that great stuff. So yeah, that's it for me today.
And I do want to kind of touch that just briefly. So it's when Tanay did like the using for the component, like he did a light bulb for component and added the @using test space. Like imagine that for C#. Like if you just magically added that light bulb to add a using for one of your statements, the using statement, it would have no @ It'd put like a blank using ABCD at the top of your file. And that doesn't do anything in Razor. That's markup, right? That's just HTML. So understanding that for C# takes a little bit more hand-holding.
Yeah.
There's just like a little bit of intricacy that you have to kind of edge case there in a lot of those types of code actions.
So for all that, I'm imagining there's a good amount of unit testing that you have to do as far as like all these weird test cases, right?
It's funny you bring it up, actually. So we're taking a different approach for light bulbs where we're actually going to be whitelisting light bulbs instead of blacklisting them. So the idea is we're going to be very specific in the light bulbs that we allow in order to not break users' experiences, because one of the things we've seen in the past is that Razor can be broken quite easily if the underlying languages are not understood well enough. And so with the language server platform approach, we have a lot more control over what happens in the files, which means we can turn things on and off at a lot easier. And so in our case, if a C# adds a brand new light bulb, yes, you're not going to get it in Razor right away. And we're sorry about that. But the reason why is because we want to make sure it works, and we don't want to destroy your document by you accidentally clicking a light bulb. So we're taking the approach of we'll wait for community feedback to say, hey, I really like light bulb X, Y, and Z, and we'll just go and add it to our whitelist. And next thing you know, you have it.
Cool. All right. So what's up next?
All right. So I think our next one is everyone's joy here. So one of the funny things is people have always hated Razor formatting because it is so destructive, destroys their documents too much, and it's one of the problems we're trying to solve. And so I think Ajay is going to be showing us a little more about Razor formatting. If you want to hand it off to him.
Yeah. So yeah, as Taylor said, we've been making a good amount of investment in formatting, specifically with redoing it with the language server protocol. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that today, show a little quick demo of what we have so far, as well as give you a little peek under the hood of how it all comes together or what challenges we're facing. So I have this Visual Studio open here. I have the checkbox enabled as Taylor showed, and I have this beautiful little code right here. And let's go ahead and format that.
I like my code the other way.
We already have the
code.
I know. Yeah, that's how Taylor likes his code to be. But for the rest of us,
that brought up a question. Somebody had something about braces, and you know, so there is support for editor config, right? So you can set that up. And I was wondering, is there any kind of like you can define using editor config the rules of how you want your code to be formatted and a lot of other things. How does that interrelate with what you folks are working with? Like, does editor config bring up any kind of headaches or problems?
Definitely. So it's one of the things we are actually looking at. So that was the other thing I was going to mention later on, which is we are in fact investigating things around what people want and what what people don't want, but with respects to settings and all that. So people could write, do people want to write C# in a certain style, and then in Razor, do they want a different style, and do they want it to be configurable? Things like that. So all of that are definitely something we're looking at, and we're so looking for feedback on that, just to know what's important to users and what's something that they don't really care about. So yeah, definitely something on our roadmap to look at, the similar things to editor config and exposing.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it's more than editor config these days, because editor config is new. It didn't exist when VS, like as long as VS has existed. Yep. So there's settings that go back prior to it, right? So it's not as simple, for us anyways, it's not as simple as, let's just make editor config work. It's, well, how far back do we go? And is that even important?
Yeah.
Yep. Continuing on, what I showed you just now already exists in VS Code as well as Visual Studio. But in VS Code, in Visual Studio for 16.8 Preview 2, there's the other thing that we introduced, which is format on type, if I can only type. So you can see that when I type semicolon, it automatically adds the spaces and all that. So this is new, and I know that this looks like something that, this already existed in the old editor and whatnot, but this is all based on language server protocol now, and we're slowly, incrementally adding features one by one. And there is good reasons for us taking that approach rather than opening up the floodgates and, all right, just let's format everything. That's because that might lead to the same pain points that the users currently have, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. Similarly, we also have format on type just for cases like these. It brings the curly down and things like that. It also works in add curly as well as the add code blocks and all sorts of good stuff. So we're currently working on trying to get HTML formatting working in a good way as to not break your apps and everything. So that's a quick demo just I wanted to show you.
One thing I want to, like, you kind of glazed over to not break your apps, but and a lot of the times before when these magic formatting pieces would happen, your app would get destroyed. It would delete portions of your app, or you'd get nonsense added to it, right? So
yeah, I was gonna show just that in a bit. So I have, let me switch to a more simpler file. So let's say I have this file. As Tanay mentioned and showed a slide a little bit earlier, we have a background generated document associated with every Razor file. So we have an HTML one and then a C# one. So this is what it looks like. So this is the HTML one. As you can see, it looks pretty similar, except it strips out all the non-HTML pieces, right? So how LSP in general works is like, this is just to give you a peek behind the hood. So how LSP works here, if you type a open angle right here, right? What happens is, we in the background go actually type this in the HTML document, pull all the completions out, and then bring it back and show it right here. So that's what happens. And then we also have another Razor provider that provides you components and things like that. So similarly for formatting, here's what will happen. So you say, let's say I want to format this part. You go to the HTML document and say, hey, format this. So it's going to say do that, which means we pick up the change right here. It says, all right, I need to do that. And then we go back and apply it right here. So that's how formatting in the simple case works. This is simple, right? Okay, cool. But what really happens if you look at a little more complex scenario, right? Let's look at the C# document. This definitely does not look as simple. As you can see, look at this specific line here. So if you look at that if true is actually somewhere around here inside a class, inside a method. And then we have a little bit of markers here to say where it actually belongs to in the original document, line 9. But really, they all are present in opposite areas. So meaning so not opposite, but just in a different line. Really, the curly and if, they're on different lines rather than the same line right here. So what really happens is if you say format in the C# document, it's going to say, hey, put this curly right here. And then move this curly back a little bit right here. So actually, before formatting, it would look something like this, right? And then you format, and it says, all right, do this. So if you actually pick that up and try to apply it right there, this is what would happen. Like it would just put the if true all the way up here, and this would just bring it all the way down here. And voila, your app is broken. this is what will happen if we just let it go through just like that. And now I didn't even talk about this little piece right here. Imagine I go to the HTML document and say, hey, format this. HTML document is just going to say, hey, put all the way over here, this line. And damn, what's going to happen is it's just going to do right this. And everything's gone. Your app is completely broken now. So this is just something, a little bit of a corner case. There's a bunch more corner cases that we have to solve to get formatting working properly in Razor. And these are the kind of things we're invested in right now, just trying to figure out how best to solve it in a more consistent way that works on all platforms.
And all scenarios too, because what you just showed is a super simple scenario. It's like a single line thing, right?
Yep.
Like, C# is so complex.
And another quick thing, which is kind of the opposite problem, is this. If you look at this code block, you can clearly see, okay, this is definitely not correctly indented. This needs to be here. Whereas in the C# document, according to C# at least, this is correct because this is inside a class and you have two-level indented. So when you really format it, it's going to do nothing. It's just going to stay right there. So we have to understand that and actually make it so that even though C# says do that, but man, you actually have to pull it back one indent level. So
you have to check them. You're like, yo, you don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So we have to run a bunch of cleanup passes over all of these things just to get them look normal and not just be crazy. So yeah,
formatting with lots of languages is super freaking hard.
Oh yeah. And yeah, when you introduce JavaScript, CSS, and all of that, it's going to be it's a fun problem to solve. But yeah, it's really challenging, and we're working on it.
So I'm going to pause you real quickly, Ajay, because there was a question from the stream, which says, at first it seemed the experimental Razor editor for Visual Studio was too limited for daily use, but there seems to be a lot of new features. Should I consider turning it on now? I would say, yeah, absolutely. And I think you can consider turning it on, and if you don't like it or if it breaks you, because again, I told you there's a lot of issues, but there's a lot of value to it too. And if it breaks, you will turn it off and wait for the next preview and give it another shot. We're iterating on this so frequently, where I think at the very least, if you do want to give these things a shot, try them regularly after every release, because we are making so many different changes every single release.
Well, as you pointed out too, it's like it's very easy to just turn it on and off, right? So it's not a huge. It's not like you're downloading a 2 GB separate installer or something. It's a checkbox.
It's just there. Yeah. And sorry to interrupt you, Ajay. Go for it. Keep going.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Just to finish off, as I showed you, hopefully that gave you some insights on what kind of challenges that we are currently working on and. That sort of thing. And like I said earlier, we're definitely looking for feedback, more people to try out this new editor. And yes, there will be rough edges, but definitely file issues. We're actively looking into all of that. And the more corner cases, especially with formatting, the more corner cases you provide, hey, this actually doesn't work, even though you said it works. So those things will help us make it better. The sooner we get all of that, we can incorporate that into the original design, and rather than providing bug fixes later on, which actually leads to a more complicated solution. So yeah, with that, I want to switch over.
Another pause real quick, actually. So any plans to allow refactoring CSS from component to scope code behind CSS? No. Not currently, actually. However, that being said, the new experience or the new editor and tooling is pretty extensible. I would totally be down for a Lightbulb if someone's willing to do that for us. Like, Tanay is working hard on Lightbulbs, and I'm sure that you can reach out to him on GitHub and kind of give you some guidance on how to write it and to potentially contribute it. It's actually not that bad of one to add.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just a other quick point regarding that, I think as someone else also mentioned, with one of the future .NET releases, we also have scope CSS files. So you should be, like, if we were to implement that component, it would look pretty
definitely
as well.
All right, Ajay, continue.
Yes. So that was formatting. So until now, we saw a whole bunch of features. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the overall experience. We keep saying, all right, we do multiple platforms, we support all of that. So I just wanted to show a little bit of just one or two quick things. So I want to start with WSL. So some of you could be Linux fans. Your code might be you would love to write your code in a WSL container or in a WSL image and everything. So VS Code, the Razor now is supported in WSL as well. So when you have this remote WSL extension, you can just go. It'll list your WSL targets. You can just I have my app already.
Ajay, you dropped for a second. You might have to repeat the last couple sentences.
Okay. I will start over from this. So if you're a fan of the Linux environment, if your code is in WSL, you wanna use VS Code with all our rich editing experience with Razor, you can actually do that. You can go download the remote WSL extension, and it'll list all of the WSL targets that you have, as well as the apps inside them, the folder structure. You can just directly open them. As you can see, you get all the
everything,
rich.
By the way, your font size is super small here.
Oh, that's true. I do that. How about this?
Okay.
Is that,
much better.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay. Oh, I was thinking there's going to be a demo fail, but it actually worked. But it worked. Yeah, you get all of the nice completions and all the experience that you get as if you're doing it in a local Windows machine rather than it looking like you're on Linux. But just to prove that I'm on Linux here, it's running on Linux and the C#. So the way it works really is that it actually downloads a copy of the Linux-specific C# extension in your WSL container, and then it kind of communicates with it remotely through LSP, and that's how this whole thing is made to work.
Breaking magic.
Yes, it's magic. That's what I
but
should say.
It's a really interesting point, though, right? Like, we can do this where, yes, it's WSL, yes, it's on your same machine, but this also works if it wasn't your same machine. It's remote development in a nutshell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're showing off code spaces, and we're showing off WSL. Like, this works remotely because we're LSP based.
Yeah. So speaking of code spaces, let me switch over to Visual Studio to show off code spaces. So this is how you connect to a code space. You say, connect to a code space. I already have one set up with my Git repository right here. So what happens is I let it clone my Git repository, and then it hosts that code in an Azure instance somewhere. So that's what's happening right now. It is right now connecting to that code space that is hosted somewhere else. It is going to establish like a remote connection, and it's going to now start communicating. Right now, the instance that I have is the client instance, and it's going to communicate with a VS headless instance running in the server. So all of that communication that happens through LSP. So you still get the familiar code spaces, familiar local experience in code spaces. It feels pretty snappy, even though every single interaction actually goes to the server and comes back, and all of that.
Okay, right-click on the file and do open folder on that file.
This one?
See the in the actual editor, the top left of the editor, the counter.
This one?
Yeah, right-click that. Do open folder.
Open containing folder.
Yeah, and then just go up to show. Like, there's
this is just a temp folder right here. Yeah,
there's nothing else next to it. Like, it's truly, you just had the file on disk, and all the magic is happening over the wire.
So it's super tiny. I can't see it, but I see it's a long folder.
Yeah, I don't know if I can zoom this one.
It's in the temp folder, though, I believe.
Yeah, you can trust me that it's in the temp folder. It's I can copy paste that. Path right here. This is where it was. It just downloads whatever you need in a minimal way, and then all of the processing really happens on the server. For example, if I click on this thing, you would have not even noticed that it highlighted all the related current counts. This doesn't happen locally because even though it has the same name, it could be different in terms of it could be some other HTML text that says current count, but really it's going to the C# language server and asking it, what are the other references to this? And then it's bringing it all back and then highlighting it on the client. So that is what's happening right here. And you get all the, you can even debug the app and put breakpoints and stuff, and you
And
get the
there's a command shell too in code spaces where you can clone whatever you want. You can edit. You can do whatever you want. Like just one of the options is to have it pre-clone something for you, but you can do whatever.
Yeah. So you can have just a native coding experience. You'll see nothing different. This is the shell that he was talking about. So you can see this is all in. This is not my machine. I don't have a workspace folder in my C. This is all connected to the server machine. What else did I want?
One thing you just showed it running, right?
Yeah.
Like you ran it. You clicked the button. That's not like it's building. It's not actually building on his box.
Exactly.
Right?
So this is a way of showing it. So you can see it's actually streaming the console right here. There's like other mouse pointer. You can see that's happening on the server machine, and I still get that thing running. And even though it says localhost, it's not really localhost to my machine. It's just forwarding all the ports, and that's how you're able to access localhost on your server machine as if it's local to you. So so there's that. Now let's go one level further. I already have this code running in some other machine. Now I want some help debugging something from someone, right? There you go, LiveShare. You can actually share. So I'm gonna share this with Taylor. Let's see if he can connect to this and help me debug. So what's happening right now is I am sharing the code that is hosted somewhere else through this client to other clients. There, Taylor Mullen is connected. There, so just like that, in his client, he will be able to get. Look at that. He just auto indented that as well as everything. What is he doing? Wow.
Nice.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
I see how it is. Well, yeah. I'm going to stop this before he runs and messes it all up. But yeah, the lesson learned here is never let Taylor access your machine. But other than that, this is a great feature that you can use, and Razor is fully supported. You get the same experience both on the CodeSpace client as well as the LiveShare guest. And we're still working on making this experience a lot better, just like the local experience. There's maybe a little kinks here and there with sometimes CodeSpace is not loading components like you see here. It happens intermittently. We're working on fleshing that out. Yeah, so that's the overall experience that I wanted to show you, and I guess Taylor's going to show off a little more about this next.
I was going to, but I don't think we necessarily have a ton of time, so I'll just fly through the rest if that's okay, John, or no?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so I'm going to hop back over to my screen real quickly. I was going to show debugging. What Ajay showed, you can debug, you can hit breakpoints. That works everywhere. I was going to show doing a Blazor WASM app. You can do debugging in Blazor WASM in VS and in VS Code now. Those are things. Search it. You can go ahead and find the right answers there.
It's also just in the latest VS Mac preview.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, very cool. So then timelines. So VS Code, this is always on. It's there already. And for .NET 5, .NET 5 is going to require 16.8. Whatever 16.8 is, we are not going to be on by default with a new editor, but we're going to still have that preview feature available. That being said, when 16.8 is there and in RTMs, there will be a 16.9 preview 1 in which we will be on by default. We will have replaced the existing Razor editor. And I think this is all kind of like looking at early next year for like a full replacement. So you get all these wonderful features, this better experience, more stable early next year. So that's kind of our timelines. High level view of the future. This is, we want C# to work great, consistent. Lots of refactorings. I'm just trying to fly through this. Reporting issues. I'll do this really, really quickly because I saw the question was asked. So the best.
I'm sharing the link just to the repo at the bottom because it's big.
Yeah, it's a big one. So .NET/ASP.NET Core. So the report issues, you go to .NET/ASP.NET Core. And you do new issue, and oh my goodness, because I'm not logged in here. Great. Really? Why does it? You have to actually, I didn't realize you actually had to do that. Great. There's a Razor tooling command or a prompt over here. I don't know why it sent me out. That's great. Probably because I'm an incognito, maybe? I don't know. Anyhow, there's a Razor tooling template in Create New Issue. That has all the instructions on how to capture the information that we need in order to properly diagnose your bugs. Please do that. Like, too frequently, people, they just find issues and they glance over them. They think it's no big deal. It'll be fixed. Honestly, we get so much feedback. It's really hard to understand when issues are reported. So the more you do it, the better. And especially in this forum, we will see it every time, and we take every issue very seriously to make sure we can address them, especially if they're catastrophic, like if we're destroying your document in formatting.
So what you just said, just to make sure people hear that, is if in doubt, it's okay to report an issue. If you think you see something, go ahead and say something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because worst case, we say we know about it. It's there. So do not worry about filing them. We love seeing this community engagement.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh,
I think he froze. Oh no, did we just lose our coordinator? We lost. Oh, there we go. John's showing it. We're good.
New issue.
Yeah, and then Razor tooling bug report.
Yep. Okay. So Razor tooling. Boom.
Yep.
And then this has that.
And in the contents, it has all the details on how to actually get started and how to actually give it enough information.
Cool. All right.
And then one last thing, we do plan to integrate this better with Visual Studio, meaning you should be able to go ahead and click this button. I know it's hard to see, but the report a problem button up in the top right-hand corner, and we should pull all the logs we care about from there. So in the future, that's coming in 16.8 Preview 3. It's not there yet, hence why I'm pointing you towards ASP.NET Core. In terms of resources, github.com/.net ASP.NET Core tooling. I mentioned you can contribute the CSS Lightbulb if you want to. This is our tooling repo. We keep it separate. The reason why we keep it separate is because there's a lot of different tooling releases that are not ASP.NET Core related. So for every .NET 5 preview 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., we have a VS for Mac, a VS Code, a VS release. We have a different repo because of that. So this is where we do the code. We file the issues in ASP.NET Core. We do the code here. I know it's a little confusing, but this is where we you can try stuff out and see how things work. We have a README to tell you how to get started. Here are our Twitter and GitHub handles. Please, we love feedback. This is Dan's link in the beginning. I think that was lightning round-ish.
Yeah.
But, please, if you have any questions at all, reach out on Twitter to anyone, GitHub to any of us. We are all super open to questions. We love helping, and we're all very passionate about what we're doing. We want to make Razor tooling experience, everything just better. I hate that everyone has so many qualms to the existing tooling experience, and we want this to be the best in class experience for you. So.
This is really cool. I'm sharing the link. So I'll add that to the community links thing that I share out. And then I'm also sending it out in the comments now. So that's the link over to that blog post. So this is great. I was not surprised we went kind of long. I think that's absolutely fine. This is really, really good stuff. So.
Yep. Totally. And we glaze past debugging. If you have issues, reach out too. Can totally show that off, or can help you out in person. So
very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch, folks. This is really good stuff.
Yeah. So, thanks for having us.
As a reminder to people watching, we've got our machine learning community stand-up starting tomorrow. So that's Wednesday at 10 Pacific, 17 UTC. And with that, I think we'll end up. And thanks a bunch for watching.
Cool. Later.